All right. A very nice man called me the other day and said he had a Marshall that he'd had a lot of techs work on. It still wasn't right. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. What model is it? And he said it was a JCM 2000 TSL 100. And I'm all Danger Will Robinson, Danger Will Robinson. These are very problematic amps. We'll get to that. And I said, well, what did the previous techs do? And he said one of them diagnosed a cold output tube and some other stuff that was all just window dressing. None of it addressed the real issue. And he's already spent over $400 with other shops trying to make this thing work. And I said, well, what's it doing wrong? And I knew what the answer was going to be. It starts to hum after it's been on a while, and the tubes start to glow cherry red, the EL34s, which is exactly what happens with all, except for the very last ones in production, JCM 2000s, TSLs, and DSLs. Now, Marshall, let me get this out of the way. Marshall has a current production amp that they call the DSL 100. It is not the JCM 2000 DSL 100. It is part of their new DSL series like the DSL 40C and CR and the DSL 20, etc. Very different amps. The modern DSL 100s are actually quite good for the price point. But the old JCM 2000 DSL and TSLs are very problematic. This board, this very pale green board, is labeled ISS 5. That's the revision of this board. And all of the ones before ISS, I believe 17, have the same problem where the board material itself becomes conductive and voltage gets where it should not get and the bias goes out the window and the EL34s cook. Now, of the 4 EL34s that came in with these electroharmonics, 3 of them look okay, though there's some fading on the label. This one has got some scorch marks on its plate. So I would wager a pretty good bet that this tube is toast. Now, 4 EL34s, it's about $200 these days. And I feel that this guy has been taken by the previous shops that did not address the actual problem. But more crucially, like every person who bought one of these things, or the DSL version, Marshall screwed this guy over. Marshall should have replaced this board for free for every single DSL and TSL 100 JCM 2000 in existence. Any other amp company that had done this to their clients, to their customers, would have gone out of business. I don't know how Marshall managed to weather this storm. It's nonsense. It's horrible. It's bad. As far as these output tubes go, I'm friends with the guys over at Tube Depot. I'm going to take these 4 EL34s there next week and ask them to put them on their tester and see if any of the 4 are still good. If by some miracle the other 3 are good and this is the only bad one, then they can probably match a new tube as far as the current draw to the other 3. I won't know until then whether these tubes are usable. I'm not going to put this one back in an amplifier until it's been tested. People ask, "What do you own a tube tester?" Actually, I have 2 up in the attic that I need to restore at some point. But I'm 15-20 minutes away from Tube Depot, and they've got really nice maxi matchers, and they never mind doing that for me. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up all these boards and check for issues, because it's very common for solder joints to break. I'm giving these an inspection now. These all look mostly okay. There's a little crack around this one. A little crack around that one. Here, cracks are beginning. That's just because this board is held in place by these jacks, and over time they get fatigued, and that stress breaks these solder joints. That's a matter of reflowing, and I'll reflow the impedance switch. Very crucially here at the 16 ohm jack here, you see that the ground does not continue on a trace across. This amp only provides ground to the 8 and 4 ohm outputs if nothing is plugged into this jack. And this jack, over time, if any corrosion builds up on that normaling there for the ground, does not have a good ground connection. And the more that corrosion builds up, the less good that ground connection gets, and then you get heat and then things get damaged. The fix for that is just to put some heavy duty, like 18 gauge or more bus wire from here to here, so that regardless of the whether something's plugged in here or not, you still have a ground. The positive, the output to the 8 and stuff, that's still affected by the impedance selector switch. So there's no reason to have this normaled. So I'm going to unnormal that. That's a weird word if you're not in audio. But let's take a look here at this board. You can see here ISS 5. Normally I would go in here and start diagnosing things. I can see heat damage here. You can see it's just kind of discolored on the board. I'm not going to go any farther on diagnosing this board because this board cannot be fixed. But I can order a brand new, it's been sitting at a shelf since these things went out of production, but an unused, new from the factory board from Marshall, which is ISS 20, which is the last revision, which does not have that problem. So that's the fix, and that's a $190 board before shipping and tax. So it's going to be like $220 just to get the board before I do any of the labor to swap it out. On that note, I tried to talk the owner out of having me fix this. I said, this is going to be probably another $300-400 you're throwing at this amp, depending on tubes and any other little things. Are you sure you want me to do this? And he said, well, the JVM series, are they any good? I said, yeah, they don't have these problems. They have other minor problems, but they're very minor. He said, well, those things cost so much more. I think it'd be better for me to just get this fixed. And I said, well, if we do this, your amp will essentially be new, and any other electrolytics here and here and here I can change out and make this thing essentially brand new, assuming the transformers are good, which I will verify off camera before going any farther. But I said, as long as you make an informed decision, I want you to know this is going to be an expensive repair on top of the expensive attempted repairs you already paid for. And he understands that. He's fine with that. But I did try to talk him out of this because somewhere between the cost of repairing this and whatever Marshall's charging these days for their 100-watt JVMs, there is a world of, I think, much better choices out there, from Sir to Friedman, even to a Seritone. You can get a Seritone and have me do some little upgrades on the input jacks and stuff like that and be well under the price of a brand new Marshall, which while it is better built than this model, is not that much better built at that price point. But this is what he wants, so this is what he's going to get. Let me show you two things on these DSL, TSL things. I hope the glare's not so bad on the video. Here is a bridge rectifier, and it is mounted flush to this board. And these things get hot because there's quite a bit of current. The new board's going to come with one just like this. I'm not going to use that bridge rectifier. I'm going to remove it and put a new one in there, mount it up off the board for some airflow beneath the component. And so the leads are longer because components will cool through their leads if the lead has some length to it. The other thing, even in a TSL, DSL that does not have a conductive board issue, there's this little cap right here. It is C46. It is between the plate and the screen, which is an odd thing to do. Most amps don't have a cap between the plate and the screen. It's there ostensibly to keep the thing from oscillating. But this cap often fails. On the new boards, it's a 1,000-volt multi-layer ceramic. On these old ones, it's a 500-volt ceramic. And these are a common failure point. So if you have a DSL, TSL, whatever, and the bias is fine, but you're blowing fuses or it just sounds off, that little cap there, you can snip it, or you can have a tech, or you yourself if you're capable, and everything's discharged, no power remaining in the amp to zap you. Remove that little 500-volt and replace it with a 1,000-volt, 1 kilovolt. And the value of that is a 220 picofarad. So very easily to do. Is that right? Yeah, 220. I wish that were the only common cause of failure in a DSL or TSL, but sadly, it's this awful, awful board. There are some little electrolytics down here on this board here. I'm going to only pull these two boards out if I find a problem. And the problems could be a bad electrolytic, but those are all 63 volt caps down there that are not seeing 63 volts on them. Odds are, even though this amp is 21 years old, 22 years old now, odds are those caps are still fine. I don't want to do everything possible if it just brings the price up for no real reason. If in 5-10 years those caps can be changed, that's an easy thing to do. These boards come out easily. I will make it, an option to the owner, but I'm trying to save him money. On this board here, the reason I would probably need to pull this would be if this input jack has any broken solder joints. The way that some of these are beginning to break, I'll be able to hear if that's a problem. And any and all of these little green pots may need a little spray of deoxit. We'll get there. Some things to point out in these. They are very happy with the quick connects in this era, including quick connects to ground. I find that this ground connection with quick connects connecting to each other and then to tabs, and over at this end where the entire safety ground is made with a quick connect, these are very problematic. Hughes and Kettner does the same thing, and I've had a lot of amps from Hughes and Kettner and this era of Marshall where there are problems that go away if I take this out and I clean every surface and then put it back together. I guess you can't see that. So I will disconnect these grounds and I will clean everything with some naphtha and then put it back together and make sure that I've got real good connections and there's no tarnishing there. And I'll try to do the same thing down here, though this has got that kind of white rivet through it. So it may not be the case, but I can probably hit it with some contact cleaner. The rest of this is just remembering which connections go where and labeling things and taking pictures. It's labor intensive. Now, I had done this before. I've done this many times before, but I've done this before on the channel with a DSL, which has practically the same everything, just fewer boards over here. And if you want to jump the gun and see what I'm going to be doing on this, I'm going to link in the description below the previous video on what it takes to make a board from out of the package from Marshall ready to be used as an actual amplifier, because as they come from the factory, they're not ready for prime time. And that video is called "Why is Grumpy Tech So Grumpy?" And I think some of you will enjoy it if you have not seen it before. So I'm going to take some measurements on these transformers. I'm going to order this board right here, and I'm going to order or get ready to order this bridge rectifier. And then once the owner sees this video, I plan on replacing these capacitors here. There's only 6 of them, these electrolytics, and I guess 7, this little one here. Unless he wants me to just make it entirely brand new, all the little caps on this board, I would like to defer because they're probably okay. All the caps on the main board are getting replaced with the new ones on the new main board. None of them are high quality caps that Marshall uses, but they're all, Samois and stuff. But generally, they're okay. The issue I have, the concern I have about this, and one of the reasons I tried to talk him out of this, is that ISS 20 board may have been sitting in a warehouse for 5+ years. So are the electrolytics in it still, as good as they should be? I will, of course, bring it up very slowly on a variac. Normally, when I have a new build, I don't worry about that because everything's brand new. I just worry about the current limiter. But I don't want something to go drastically wrong on his new board. For example, on the last DSL board, Why is Grumpy Tech So Grumpy? Marshall had installed one capacitor backwards at the factory, and I didn't catch that. So I had to take the amp all the way apart to rechange one brand new, so to speak, capacitor. A lot of extra labor on my end. I did not charge the owner for that, but I would love to send Marshall a bill. Everyone's responsible for this but the guilty party. The owner will probably have $800 in this amp between this repair and the previous attempted repairs. At the end of it, he'll have an amp that finally finally works as this one was advertised. And I think that borders on criminal.